You cannot beat a child to take away his tears. The words of a Swahili proverb that bring us into this episode of the Jamaican Dadz podcast. I'm Dennis Brooks.
I'm Marlon Campbell.
And I'm Garth Williams. And we are
Jamaican Dadz. Well, this program provides a functional forum for us to tackle many of the taboo topics that are of concern to fatherhood and parenting in general.
Our main discussion today is raising emotionally intelligent children. But before we get there, let's fire off with the opening salvo. And in this week's opening salvo, we discuss how to have the birds and bees conversation with your children.
Over to you, God. Over to you, Mr. Williams, because I have a few years to go.
Well, we hope we have a few
Yeah,
years to go.
yeah.
No, but before I even get into what I do at home,
Yeah.
right, I think it would be important for us to kind of take a reflection
Yeah.
on how we had that conversation
Or did not.
have the conversation with our parents.
Well, I don't
So let's
Mine. Make sure you use them.
and I guess those were condoms you throw it onto the table, and that was the extent on the bed, and that was the extent of your conversation.
That was about it.
That's it. Mommy, but did mommy say anything to you at all? Miss Sharon say nothing to you?
Make sure you're not. No, hold on. Me see a anchor around so daughter. Make sure you're not breed nobody.
All right. Yeah.
Okay.
And for me,
Wow.
At this point, by the way, they're telling me this, I was very versed on at least the theory of everything because I read so much. There is this book about, things every boy should know and other stuff. And because I read so widely, I had a fairly working knowledge of the birds and the bees.
right. Yeah, I mean, I read quite a bit too. I was forced to read until I got to the point where I actually loved reading as a child. But I grew up with mommy mainly in the house. I'd see daddy quite often, but he wasn't in the house. So it wasn't until I got to university that daddy had a conversation with me.
I did it late.
And by then, I was a few paces down the weekend.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
Why, man?
But dad was more like, all right, well, listen, you're in university now, so just be responsible with whatever you do. Just be responsible, and I'm here to help you
Did you
get through it.
listen?
I did listen.
In being responsible?
Was I responsible? Not 100% of the time.
I'm saying.
Right?
Careful how you answer.
Right? From my mother's side, it was literally the same advice Miss Sharon gave. One afternoon she came home and I was entertaining a young lady. Right?
Studying, naturally,
No,
of course.
no. This was literally entertainment. Right? And we were in my bedroom, which was an out of bounds zone for anybody but myself or my mother at that phase. So, when she came into the house, we already made our way into the living room, and she looked at the young lady and said, "Young lady, you need to leave." And she respectfully left immediately. And then mommy went, "Look here, be done ready for turn granny. Understand that." Okay. And then the second time was I came home from my first semester break at UA. And again, I was entertaining a young lady. But because I was 19 at the time, I figured that the bedroom is not out of
Look at him. Poor innocent chap. You're mad?
So Miss Shirley just was not having it at all. And she knocked on the door and she said, "I know that is not you alone in there. I'm going outside, and when I come back, be alone in there." And we took that message, and the young lady quickly disappeared. She pulled up to David Copperfield. And then mommy called and she said, "You can't wait till you're married. You can't wait till you're married. Me don't want on granny before you're married." The end. That was literally the conversation, right? But we'll get into the other part of it just now. How about you, Dennis? Did you ever get to talk?
All right. So there was a book in my house that my older brother and my eldest
Penthouse?
No. No. My mom gave my big sister a book on becoming a woman.
Yes.
And my brother got on becoming a man.
Yes.
Read.
Read
this.
Yes.
Outside of
How
that.
old were you at the time?
I mean, but me fast and go read early, you know. You know, it in
so
the
like me.
it in the bookshelf, so me screech and go read and me hide and read.
Drawings. Did anybody else feel guilty looking at these
Yes.
drawings?
Yes.
Which were not pornographic. in
No,
any way,
no.
But
No.
There's a bit of guilt, but there was a bit of weirdness too, because like you see these, obviously they're drawings, so they have a cartoonish type of vibe to them,
Yeah.
right?
Slightly a diagram, but slightly not. Yeah.
Exactly. And then because part of it too is that they're drawing white people.
yeah, exactly.
So when you're looking at these girls' bodies and you're going, okay. So I said, oh, all right, this is interesting. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It was a little bit off-putting, but
Yeah. So like I read both books.
yeah.
Because you know you want to get both perspectives, or I did at the time. I don't know. Yeah, and so there wasn't much conversation per se. There was the warnings and stuff like that. But you dare not, me, Carol, oh my God, not, you know, Mrs. Brooks,
Right, go ahead, Carol. How would a man get a Carol
In the first instance, I didn't expect her to return that early. She was supposed to return
No,
sometime after 4, and
it's
she
a-
returned instead after 2.
No, you see, that's a difference with me. That's a difference with me.
It ain't
Like,
a chance,
at my mother house, like, you just never think about it because, like, the Holy Ghost are going to tell her or something.
As my mother said to me, his mama said, it's one of those thoughts that were even if your dream say you have it, just deadness.
No, I would never think that. No. But then also I went to good Catholic high school and them give you the whole talk.
Good Catholic, because
They
you know
give you
what
the
I
talk,
believe
and you know.
God, tell him so that not help him case.
No.
In the grand scheme of things,
No, I said a good Catholic school.
They all are good Catholic schools.
right,
Yes.
they're all good.
Yes.
Anyhow,
And right, but I think that, you know, I suppose it will be different for us because this generation is different and they have a greater access to information.
Right.
I mean, back in our days, it was encyclopedia and got a library and that kind of everything. Now they have the devices there in the palm of their hands from birth, literally.
Right.
So I mean,
Good and bad, actually.
yes,
because
Right.
yes.
I think they're getting introduced to things that perhaps you would have rather them get introduced to
at a later
a later
phase.
stage. And
Or you'd
also
want
setting,
control over how it's introduced to them.
Exactly.
And you know, it's so much easier. You said, you know, you were probably skipped far down the wicket, but by the time, imagine your kids when you have the talk and you're like,
But
you're
I
like,
can tell you how it go now.
Yes, you're supposed to.
Right.
Yeah.
So my daughter is 12, and her menses have started. So we by default.
and it's okay to have that, to say that on air. You don't think it's weird?
Yeah, no.
Okay.
No, it's weird for me because I'm like, oh my God, I'm the father of an adolescent. Like she is officially becoming a woman.
Yes.
Which is really
Yeah.
what it's a passage of it's a passage of life.
She still have well, mad uncle just.
Yeah, no, I mean,
Her uncle, yeah.
so
Yeah.
we're having a
No, I'm just saying that there are some people who are going to say, how could you say that? How could you?
put her out there like
Yeah.
Oh, well, you know, think about it like that. I mean, it's a natural part of life. There's no more taboo around talking about.
I totally agree.
Yeah,
Exactly.
I totally
And I'm
agree.
glad you
period.
raised it, but
Yeah.
so we can say
You know, yeah, people for talk about period, man for talk about period, woman for talk about period.
Exactly.
And use them and make them understand what's going on in their life.
Side note,
Thank you.
Big shout out to I've seen Yendi and a few other persons doing this end period poverty drive. So big
Yeah.
up.
Shelly Ann Weeks was the
Shelly
one
Ann
who
Weeks.
started
Shelly
it.
was
Yeah.
who is really the captain
Shelley.
that
Yeah, Dr.
push
Shelley is who been Dr. Sexy.
Dr. Sexy Ann.
pushing that. So side note, look on that.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And leave it.
Right. So I mean, and now our 8-year-old son has come into that conversation because it couldn't be a secret. You know what I mean? Her body's changing, things are happening. You know what I mean? So Donette and I have had the conversation in different ways. Donette really leads it because she's closer to her mother about these things, especially because it starts. You know what I mean? And I never, this is not a lived experience for me, so I can't really relate.
There are
like
certain
that.
things that they turn to their same sex parent about, and then
Right.
they
Right.
things that they turn to the
Opposite
opposite
sex, right. So it's really about, all right, look here. This is happening to your body, and this is why this is happening to your body, right?
These are the implications.
And these are the implications, right? Now, as a result of those implications, what you need to do is when the time arrives, right, to approach responsibly, right? And we've spoken about how to approach responsibly, right? How to engage and not to engage, and the law around it, because that's the other part of it too. Because what a lot of parents what a lot of parents probably neglect to point out to their children when they're having a conversation is that there are laws around these things. The age of consent is 16. I mean, I have my whole set of issues around the age of consent and when you can vote for, you know what I mean, and all these things. But the fact is, the law of the land says at age 16, that's the age of consent. Anything prior to that is a criminal act under the law, right? And that's the way it is, right? So we've started to speak about those things in a very frank, open, honest way. And just to hear her feelings, it's not preachy. It's really conversational and it's fact-based. You understand me? I think the only thing we can do as parents in our household is to ensure that we have the proper conversations and we empower the young lady to make the right decisions at the right time.
But is a part of the birds and the bees conversation discussing about understanding themselves and the fact that they're going to have feelings and they're going to feel things around people now, and to understand that it's okay to feel the feels, but also to be responsible in how you feel and
how you act on
and
those
how you
feelings.
act on those feelings.
Not act rather.
Right? You know, in teaching boys, especially boys who sometimes develop an entitlement or a sense of entitlement to other women's bodies, that they need to appreciate you cannot do certain things. You cannot just act on how you feel. And you teach them it from early.
Because I was saying that some persons assume the conversation with a boy child would be easier in almost, because we almost think that, and it really isn't, because there's a lot of responsibility.
Both are very
that comes
nuanced.
with it.
You
understand? And you some parts of the conversation will be similar, but a large part of it will have to be geared specifically towards.
Do you also think that there's a certain age appropriateness and graduated nature of the conversation? So like at 6, there might be things that you need to be saying.
So with Nick, for example, Nick just wants to understand the basics. He wants to understand how his body works. Oh, Daddy, I already talking to Noel about a period. What does that mean? You know? And I just give him the biology of it. Literally, just the biology of it. You know what I mean? Because he's not so much concerned at the moment about how he feels or who he's attracted to or whatever. No, him just curious. You know what I mean? At a different phase, then we can start introducing other things. Because there's a point in his life soon where he will get a wet dream. You know? And then that is going to invite
to be ashamed of
exactly.
Right.
Yeah. So yes, a need for age appropriateness is absolutely critical. So I would advise parents to ensure that you talk to your doctors if you don't know how to have the conversation. It might be a weird thing for you with kids, but talk to your doctors, ask for advice, talk to a pediatrician, a guidance counselor, whoever it is, somebody who's a professional that can guide you along the way, and you have to know your children.
And in fact, I mean, even with the book that you said you read, and with me, maybe I'll want to read it together.
Right.
And you read it, it introduces something you can, as the parent, then answer and all. It could be a fun exercise, a fun learning exercise and all. Yeah. But yeah.
Well, that's it for the opening salvo. Using the hashtag Jamaican Dadz, let us know what you think. Connect with us online.
Tell us about your birds and the bees conversation.
We'd love to hear.
We'd love to hear. If one even happen.
That's right. At Jamaican Dadz, Facebook and Instagram. The Jamaican Dadz on Twitter. We're going to take a quick break, and when we return, we'll be talking about raising emotionally intelligent children. We'll be right back after this.
Thanks for staying with us here on the Jamaican Dadz podcast. If you're just joining us, we are now into the meat of the matter. And this week, The discussion segment is focusing on raising emotionally intelligent children. Now, if you were with us last week, you would know that this is a part two of that segment. In the first discussion, we really were looking at exploring concepts and exploring how to identify emotional intelligence in people, generally speaking, and in children in particular. Our guests are Grace Alvaranga and Jhanille Brooks. So happy to have you ladies rejoining us.
Thank you.
Night. Thanks for having us.
Good.
And also Garth Williams. I find that last week the discussion was really good, and I was encouraged on the day after when I bumped into a colleague who said that he was in a taxi and heard people talking about the discussion. And that was really encouraging that people listened, but people actually having a conversation the following day. And I think that for us as parents, as fathers in particular, it's not just about talking about, okay, it's a nice thing, Grace Alvaranga, but I think in this segment, we should talk a little bit more about how to develop it, how what skills we can utilize, and what we can put into practice. Grace?
Okay. Thanks again for having me. And I think we really got off to a good start on Thursday. And when I think about the skill sets, we had earlier established what emotional intelligence is. And in a nutshell, we are saying it's being in touch with our emotions, the things that trigger the feelings that we have, whether we're sad, we're happy, and so forth. But exactly how do we get in touch with this and how do we manage it? Earlier, I'd said on the previous show that what we should actually do is to be self aware, know exactly what is happening on the inside. I'm not feeling so happy today, I'm feeling very elated today. Now, having done that, we should also identify what trigger these feelings. It may be that I'm in a period where I'm particularly happy or I'm particularly sad. And if I stop and think, I will now say, okay, this is happening, or it's because of a death, or it's because of my inability to cope in COVID, or it's because it's exam period, for the younger ones and so forth. Now, having identified exactly what the root is, then the next step we should say is, what do I do? And I think what I'm putting here in a nutshell is what we would coin as we begin to do some cognitive restructuring, identify what affects us, and begin to change the way we think and tell ourselves what we need to do. Just as I need to be early for school, I need to be early for work. When I feel this particular emotion, this is what is going to happen to me. So I need to do this positive action to manage the emotion.
Yeah. Uh, Jhanille, can you pick up from there just to kind of respond to Dennis's question and also to just share your own views?
All right. Well, I mean, I think Grace summed it up pretty nicely, but I think the point that I would want to kind of piggyback on is that whole part about self-awareness. That's another key part of emotional intelligence, but it's also is a concept by itself that we need to explore. This whole notion of being aware of self, your value system, your thoughts, your feelings, and how those shape your interaction with both yourself and others. And this is mainly done through introspection. It's very important that we all take that periodic look within ourselves and to do like a checkup. How are we doing? Are we where we need to be as people? Are we behaving the way that we intended to, aligned with our values, etc. So self-awareness is a very, very, very key part of emotional intelligence, and that is also something that we should hope to develop in our children as well, so that when they're adults, it comes more naturally, right? So through the self-awareness, you recognize whether or not you're being emotionally intelligent or unintelligent.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Dennis. Go ahead.
I wanted to pick up though, because in the early stages of cognitive development for children, and I mean, if we're looking at it from Piaget, for example, that they're going through different things at different times and going through different stages of development, then we have to, I would imagine, have a certain level of tolerance for what they're going through and what kinds of emotional turmoil they might be experiencing. One of the things for me that I find challenging is to teach like a toddler, my child, for instance, what the different emotions are. Can we go there, Jhanille, a little bit so that they know that this is anger? I'm feeling I'm angry, or I'm sad, or I'm happy, or what emotional responses to actually identify them. How do we do that in a way?
I think it would come through processing of the situation. So usually it would be a situation in a toddler, a situation would happen that would trigger an emotional response. So when you do that debriefing, either during or after, that's when you get to teach the child, okay, X happened, you felt this way, this emotion is called anger. Here is appropriate ways to express your anger, here are inappropriate ways, right? Another thing that you could do with toddlers, for example, is have a chart. I know it was Ministry of Health or Ministry of Education used to have one of those charts that it had all the different smiley faces.
Yeah.
So the different emoticons. So anger had a particular face, happy had a particular face, etc. And you have it up somewhere in the child's room so that they can see it regularly. And then you do a check-in at the end of every day, for example, like something like I do with my younger clients. They come into the room, how are you feeling today? And then they point to the chart, they point to the physical chart. They say, this is how I'm feeling today. And then we process different things that might have happened throughout the day that led them to feel that way. So that those are two examples.
What say you, Grace?
I was so happy when Jhanille went there, because that I was thinking that for toddlers we have to teach them in creative and attractive ways, kind of caricature. So you say anger, you as the parent, you might demonstrate the anger with a face and happy, that kind of thing. Now the chart that is mentioned, parenting, strange enough, we don't see it as a skill that needs to be taught, but in reality it does. We learn by experience, but maybe parenting, we need to have a parenting 101 course running somewhere in our curriculum that will actually teach us how to understand. But for the kids, the feelings chart is perfect, because it works not just for the toddlers, but even as they grow a little older, where they can actually look at these figures that they can identify with and appeal to them and make the connection. But it has to be a teaching, learning situation that is constantly reinforced.
So then, in the same way that we teach children how to identify colors and numbers,
Yes,
you're
yes.
developing literacy, numeracy, but also we actually school them in emotional intelligence so that they can appreciate what these things are. Never thought of the feelings chart. I'm going to definitely have to get one as well.
And another thing that you can do is to have the child identify where they're feeling the emotion in their body. So anger, for example, if you start to breathe faster, you notice that your heart is racing or your head is pounding. In happiness, how do you feel? Where do you feel that in the body, so that they're getting the full understanding of what an emotional response is.
Not hearing you, Garth.
Sorry about that. I wanted to ask Jhanille, pardon me, about that color chart, just to kind of build a little bit on Dennis's question, because Dennis has, Jackson is what now, Dennis? 2 years old or
2 years
thereabout?
old.
Two, right? So there are some things that he can identify, there are some things that he cannot. Are 2-year-olds capable of identifying their feelings like that in a tangible way? Like they could identify, like, okay, this is a broom, this is a shirt, this is a bottle. How do you do that at that age? Because the intervention needs to be done early,
To be
right?
age appropriate, yes.
Yeah.
Like they would be able to identify if they have the vocabulary for it. So they've been taught the words anger, sad,
Yeah.
happy. And then, like Grace has been saying, through the modeling of the facial expressions or the body language, they will start to make the connection. So once they have the vocabulary for it,
Mhm.
they'll be able to start to be able to identify those emotions.
All right. Now, this is something that has to also be reinforced in schools. I'm not quite au fait with the education system and the curriculum taught at the early childhood level, but are you, either of you ladies, aware of it being taught or engendered as a part of the curriculum at that phase?
Well, not that I'm aware, Janelle. I don't know if it happens that early. I know it is done later on, through the whole course. Back in my day, it was called guidance and counseling way back then. Now we have health and family life. So it's taught, I know, even at the high schools, but at the kindergarten and preschool, I am not sure what exactly happens there. But I'm almost sure it happens in the regular teaching, because just as they sing songs, there are songs that they do as part of the learning system, and the songs will speak about emotions. So it's not about just learning to count or learning to read, but singing about life and how you feel. So I figure it is done at some part, but what I think does not happen is that it is done in a structured and targeted way.
Yeah. And the other thing I want to build on too, your point on parenting being taught as a part of the school curriculum. I do suppose that the best point to introduce it would be at high school, secondary level. Um, is it one of those things that you want to add to the agenda of the guidance and counseling or the health and family lifestyle, or should it be a subject on its own, taught for either the school year or 2 terms? How do you evaluate that the learning has taken place? How do you evaluate the knowledge, if the knowledge has been transferred?
It could be a topic that best suited, because already the curriculum is overloaded. So you don't want to add another subject area that might prove to be burdensome. But it could easily be inserted in that health and family life, and then they are given some assignment. Whether it's a group assignment, a paper to dramatize, which you have some grade or some incentive and reward. But I think it would be best inserted in the health and family life curriculum.
Yeah. Dennis?
Yeah, I certainly think so. I remember some months ago, Jackson stumbled upon a YouTube video that had a variation of if you're happy and you know it. And it said, if you're angry and you know it, stomp your feet. Or if you're scared and you know it, say, oh no. And some other ones. And I thought, okay, this is good. But I mean, I tried to say, okay, where do we take this from here? Like, I thought to, how do I develop emotional intelligence in this child? It is something that I hope that when he begins school in September, when he goes out to nursery and begins that early childhood experience, that they begin to include these things into him.
Mhm.
But it's something that I'm trying to start from in the home.
Definitely.
Yeah. All right. You're watching, you're tuned in to the Jamaican Dadz podcast. We're discussing raising emotionally intelligent children with psychologist Jhanille Brooks and Grace Alvaranga. We'll be right back after these messages.
We're back here on the Jamaican Dadz podcast. If you're just joining us, we have been having a very spirited conversation about raising emotionally intelligent children. It's part two, so I would encourage you to go back and view last week's episode. You can view it on various podcast platforms as well, where our guests in this segment are Jhanille Brooks and Grace Alvaranga. Jhanille, I want to in the direction now of how we operationalize teaching emotional intelligence, depending on whether you have a daughter or a son, and depending on what type of daughter or what type of son that you have, because they always say 7 different brothers, 7 different men. But
Mm-hmm.
looking at gender differentials, is it right? Is it okay to give girls different emotional skills than boys, given what the world demands of them?
I think what is more important is teaching the concept of emotional intelligence, the basics first, in terms of here are the emotions, here's how they feel. You are allowed to feel all of them. Here are appropriate ways of expressing them. Here are inappropriate ways of expressing them. Now, this topic is a little ticklish because of, thinking about just how certain things are in Jamaica and in the world in general. So gender norms have existed from the dawn of time. And I know we're now in a space where those kind of norms may seem to be less popular than before, and it's becoming more of a gray area. Anyways, I believe what is important for me, based on what I'm seeing in social issues now, is teaching boys that sadness is an emotion that they can experience. Allowing them to realize that there are some ways of expressing that sadness that may not be socially acceptable, meaning it may bring other social consequences if expressed in certain ways, but sadness by itself is okay to have. I think also what is important is that when it comes on to the anger emotion, there definitely, no, what would you call it there? There's like a no tolerance for expressing the anger in these ways, such as violence against women, or when it's teenagers or boys, you tell them, you're not allowed to hit girls, you're not allowed to, talk down to them in particular ways. Like, that is important just because of how we're seeing things play out now. I think it's very crucial that that line be drawn from very early and that be reinforced over and over again. But the expression of all the emotions, especially for the boys, is very important because we see how our boys and our men only seem to be comfortable expressing certain kinds of emotion, and even happiness to a less degree. I mean, yes, I'm, maybe in certain situations like a football match or some kind of sporting event, it's more appropriate for you to express happiness than, you just did a random day, just happy, go lucky. Like, people gonna be like, yo, dog, warm tail, like, so just expressing all of the emotions for men, I think is something that we need to keep on driving home, and the ways that which they. So I don't want to draw the line between girls express emotions this way, boys express emotions this way, and therefore we socialize them and teach them differently. I think for me, that personally and professionally, they need to just grasp the concept first as young children and teenagers.
Grace, you want to add to that?
Yes, I'll just go ahead and say, bottom line, it is the concept that has to be grasped. So the lesson must be taught. But the challenge we face is in the delivery, and that challenge, I think, is based on there is an intrinsic difference in the whole biological makeup of men and women and how they process emotions. If we remember this famous book, Men Are From Mars and Women Are From Venus, it's a popular one they tend to use when, to understand the difference between how male and females think and operate. Hence, some problems we have in a relationship. Now, without going into the intricacies of the biology behind it, but it is proven that men are more analytical and the women, we are more in tune with our emotions. So, with that established and the lesson to be taught about our emotions and how we can express them in a positive and effective way, we'll have to look at, okay, we're teaching about the happy face and so on, and teaching about how you manage the various emotions. But for the men in that delivery, we will have to use an approach that is more analytical because of their intrinsic makeup to analyze things. For the female, we can appeal to that emotional side where we cue into the female's emotions in doing the delivery. But at the end of it all, the lesson must be taught.
Yeah.
I asked the question because we're not just products of nurture. There are biological basis of our behavior. So you have to think about, people often talk about right brain, left brain, and people talk about
Yes, yes.
the impact of hormones on how we will respond. And I wanted us to get to the point in the conversation where we're talking about older children, like when we're raising adolescents and those raging hormones, and they're going to be, having emotional responses that they can't even understand. So, I mean, for me, in that regard, I want to get a bit of a more understanding about how you navigate that development of emotional intelligence at that phase of the developmental process.
Well, that is a fact because even with the testosterone and the estrogen level, the testosterone as it relates to the men, it propels them in a particular way of thinking that in the female it is going to be the opposite because when we look at even like the brain connection between different levels of testosterone, you have some research that suggests that men are more likely to be more subdued, cool, and respond better to adversity. Although we're not seeing that now, interestingly. But for the female, we have to identify everything basically through how we feel, what we sense, the emotions, and that goes to how the different sides of the brain function. So yes, there is a biological makeup that we have to take in place. We have to take to consideration, but how we manage it and align it with the psychological development is where the challenge is. But I think once we understand the basics that men operate in a particular way, they are more analytical. Females, we are more in tune with our emotions, then we can understand that. And of course, those adolescent years when the hormones, as you rightly put it, it is raging, Dennis. And we have to understand that that is the body's way of balancing out. And it is in conjunction with the brain and impacts reasoning. And this lesson has to be taught in that context.
Let me ask you on behalf of Garth, for instance, Jhanille, when you have a daughter who is now physically changing, and she's going to be having emotional, maybe a period of PMS that you as a father are going to have to deal with. How do you be a more emotionally intelligent father? I'm asking on behalf of Garth. How do you be a more emotionally intelligent father so that you help her manage her emotions?
Well, I mean, the first part would be to, like, you've already acknowledged that, okay, because she is growing and changing, the hormones are raging, etc. There's going to be heightened emotional response, and then of course as the PMS time approaches, even more so. So knowing that it comes, right, and acknowledging that, but also teaching her that unfortunately these heightened emotional responses are a part of the package, and navigating with her what are some things that to manage that emotional response. What can I do to help during this time, especially? I think that conversation, even though some fathers, it's very awkward to have that conversation with their daughters, but I think it's very necessary. So it's just like, you're going through this, how can I help you? Also, what are you feeling apart from physically? What are you feeling? So have her identify the range of emotions that comes with that particular time and that comes with adolescence in general. Gareth, I hope that was
Uh,
helpful.
Oh, it was very helpful. I've been taking notes. No, what you said is true. Certainly about the awkwardness, because as Dennis mentioned, physically changing now. There's some, because she's started seeing her period, so she's kind of closer to her mother now during this phase of her journey. And it's something to which I can relate. I just don't have that lived experience. So I notice the conversations are a little bit different. I have to ask for information. But what I seek to do is just, well, we've provided a very good example, or good examples from me and our mother, about how to how to deal with others, to be respectful, to be mannerly, to be considerate, and so on, to adjust well, and to speak up for herself when offended, and to ensure that she tries to limit any offense that she causes to others, and be ready to apologize and accept and learn. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so I'm learning as I go along, and I think for especially for men raising daughters, um, there is a learning curve. I don't know how steep it is, but you just have to try and remain as open and as flexible as possible.
Yes,
And
yes.
then I've learned to rely on her mother a lot as well, to kind of help me understand certain situations. And if she react a certain way to particular things or changes, then to not take offense. So my first reaction now, whenever I see something adverse, so to speak, in her, is to kind of be more empathetic rather than going and getting on the defensive as a parent and going, "Hey, hold on a second, me father, you child."
Yes.
But it's a journey, and I think it's very good that we're having this conversation, because it is a learning for me, as it is for everybody else who will be tuned in. And speaking of that, we've got to take a quick break. You're listening to the Jamaican Dad's podcast. You're tuned into the Jamaican Dad's podcast. We're discussing raising emotionally intelligent children, and we'll be back with more after these messages.
Welcome back to the Jamaican Dad's podcast. We're into the final segment of the program, and we are discussing raising emotionally intelligent children with Grace Alvaranga and Jhanille Brooks. We have been covering a lot of ground. We've moved from toddlers to girls versus boys, and also tackling the tough adolescent years if you're just joining us. But let's talk some solutions. Let's talk some practical tips that we can give to parents who are saying, I need something, I need a gem, I need some guidance. Let's turn to you first, Grace.
Okay, in terms of the practical tips that we can use is the common family talk and sitting down to talk about ourselves, revealing who we are as parents, and not just talking about the good side and prettying of things, but also those parts of us that are not so good and it needs improvement. I believe children are the greatest appreciators of honesty. And once they realize that we are honest and open, they are more receptive to whatever it has. So even in our family setting, we can improve these family talks and be open and not fearful to express the emotions. I was just also thinking too in the break that just as we have this campaign, well, we have had a few campaigns through the Ministry of Health, and I know one that stuck with me as an adult was Love Your Body, Treat Your Body Right. No, mental health is a form of health, and I am thinking if on a national level, our Ministry of Health could embark on this public awareness campaign that focuses on parenting and cultivating emotional intelligence, then that can be a national initiative that we can take on. Just as we are having our campaign now about, managing this pandemic, we I am thinking it is critical for us to go in that direction of developing the emotional capacity for our children. And it starts with us as the adults. So being open, being self aware, talking about and admitting to our mistakes. So when I have a bad reaction and I scream and get on, carry on and tear off my clothes, I must be willing to come back in that same forum, say to my child, I'm sorry because my behavior was inappropriate, it was out of place, and I should be able to discuss the behavior, because that is also a way of pointing our children in the right direction. It is not always about trying to do the right thing or doing the right thing, but it is also how we do our damage control.
Can I play devil's advocate for a brief moment, though, Grace? I appreciate the second part of your point about when you lose control of your emotions and react negatively, that you should be willing to go back to your child and say, hey, no, look here, what I did was not the way it should be done. So I apologize for that reaction. And, I'll do better going forward. But the previous point about having those conversations about yourself with your children and admitting the flaws as well, and not just talking about, glorifying yourself, so to speak. Don't you think you give up quite a bit of authoritative real estate, so to speak, when you say to your child, when I was your age or whatever, this is how I used to react, or this is how I was? Because then, don't you think you're setting up yourself for, well, you used to do it, so, well, hey.
I'm glad you brought that up, because we have to do that within certain contexts and limitations, and we have to know our children, because if you will know your child, and if the child is not able to process, then we can't do that sharing. So the sharing has to be done in knowing the child and the context of their maturity. And the maturity is not necessarily age, because some children are young, but they are quite mature in their thinking. So there has to be some guideline and exercising of wisdom as you reveal as the parent, because as you rightly said, you don't want to give up that authority figure that you have.
Yeah. Jhanille, since we're in that solution section of the show, we've got like probably about 6 or so minutes to close out the program. Let's keep talking solutions as we move forward here.
Yeah, I think I had mentioned two before, which were the feelings chart that you can purchase. Don't know where, purchase them somewhere, but a cool activity would be to draw the feelings with the child, like a smaller child. How are you today? How are you feeling today? And then you guys, the child draws the smiley face, or you have a couple of the printables and the color, and you guys color together. That could be an activity that you do together. Also, teaching the children and providing outlets for the emotional expression. So teaching them how to express, providing outlets. For example, a wonderful tool is journaling, or when you're younger, diary, whatever you want to call it. So providing them with that, of course, respecting the space. So you can't go and give the child a journal and then every minute you're peeking in it either, right? Also teaching them different ways of having the emotions and doing things to get rid of them, so to speak. So if you're in a bad mood or angry, what can you do? So for example, I used to work in a juvenile correctional facility, and we taught the boys about anger management, and we tell them about exercise, but of course they're confined, so they can't go out when they want to. And we were in a group therapy session one day, and a fight almost kick off, and I say one of my boys, he found a little corner and he just started doing push-ups. Group therapy is going on, and my man in the corner just doing push-ups, and he did probably about 50 until he got up. And I look at him and say, "You good?" He's like, "Yeah, man." And he just have to blow off some steam, So just teaching them how to do those things, providing the outlets, doing family exercise. Grace mentioned the whole thing about sitting down. Sunday dinner doesn't seem to be that popular anymore. We need to bring that back. I hope the pandemic kind of brought back that whole practice. Sunday dinner, sitting down, talking. How was your week? What are your plans for the week? And what do you feel about this? Oftentimes we ask persons, children included, what do you think about this? Also ask, what do you feel about this? How do you feel about this? Because very often how I think about something is different from how I feel about it. A thought and a feeling are different. So just cultivating that kind of conversation, the ride home from school, for example. I mean, I know we're in a pandemic, but just being together, processing the day, processing the feelings, and not just Miss gave us whole heap of homework, processing. And when the child is having a bad moment, either an anxiety-inducing situation like a big test coming up, acknowledge the feeling and process through the feelings. I'm feeling nervous because C-section or I have a big dance performance. I'm feeling angry because some in the line at school. Have the kind of conversations, but focus on the emotional aspect, not just what happened, but also how did it affect me emotionally.
Grace, I want to touch before we go, because it's easy, or it's maybe easier to talk about some of the emotions like angry, happy, sad. But in Jamaica, we have a very serious problem with this thing called disrespect. This feeling of him dissed me and I reacted. And then there's things like depression, anxiety, you mentioned nervousness, and just feeling offended. How can we focus on some of those kinds of emotional responses to external stimuli?
Okay, it ties in with what I wanted to say towards the end as we continue on the how, is that we have to sensitize and teach our children these specific emotions to know when I'm depressed, when I'm nervous, when I'm anxious, when I'm being oversensitive. So it is a sensitization, it is a teaching and a telling. How do I react in stressful situations and those stressful situations will bring out the anxiety. We have to tell them, oh, you're anxious because you are doing this, because this situation, it's ABC. And we also have to teach them how to take and tell them how to take responsibility for their actions. And not only the telling, but also let them know what is the benefit, what are the benefits of being emotionally intelligent, of having the right reaction. But it is really a telling, a showing, a sensitization that has to be constantly reinforced. And I'm happy you brought out those other feelings, because we often don't talk about being depressed, and I believe a lot of us are going around and there's depression, there's anxiety, and there are a whole host of other stuff going on that goes even into the abnormal behavior, but that is another program for that. But we have to identify, point out, teach, tell, sensitize, and constantly reinforce.
Yeah. It's so true because we are emotional beings. And a lot of what we see, just kind of building on Dennis's point there, a lot of what we see in the news, especially, and there are lots of things that don't even make the news. There are some things that only come to people like yourself, Grace and Jhanille. There are some things that only come to people like Dennis, as a member of the constabulary force. I'm a journalist. I'm a communication specialist. There are only some things that will come to me based on what is happening in a particular business or a corporate entity. Nonetheless, if we can't properly process our emotions, identify them, process them, manage them, we're going to keep on seeing these kinds of negative things that dominate our headlines. If there is, as we close, I'm going to ask you, Jhanille, if there is one thing that you would say to parents, especially, to really make sure that they do to help their children make emotionally intelligent decisions, what would that be? And I will ask a similar question of you, Grace, but I would want you to probably target the government, make a recommendation for them. But go ahead, Jhanille.
Grace got the hard question. Definitely would say that tying back to one of the first concepts you spoke about, teach them self-awareness. So teach that whole concept of introspection so that as they grow older, they're able to identify their thoughts, their feelings, their actions, the consequences of said actions. They can then from there develop empathy. I think starting from that place of self-awareness, body and mind, and emotions, I think is a good place to start and to continue building, because as we keep on saying, this is not a one-time deal. You know, you start with them when they're young and you continue, and the methods get more age appropriate. So self-awareness is one of the key things that I would say we need for children.
Yeah. And Grace, with a hard question, your recommendation to the government.
Oh, I am so happy for this moment because, along with you and Garth, I would like to make a national appeal for the institution of a national program spearheaded through the Ministry of Health, where we can run an educational and a practical campaign as it relates to development of our whole psychological well-being as a nation, as Jamaicans. And that can be a program.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a very good note on which to close. I mean, we've said a lot, we've shared a lot, and what we will do through our various platforms is to share a lot of these gems that you have shared with us tonight. So thank you very much, Jhanille Brooks and Grace Alvaranga, for your contribution to the program, but also to Jamaica as a whole in your role as psychologists. Dennis Brooks, a lot has been said, yes?
It has. It's been a great deal of food for thought, and I'm glad we had this segment.
Good. All right. Well, we are gonna come back and close the program right after these messages. You're tuned in to the Jamaican Dadz podcast. Thanks for staying with us here on the Jamaican Dadz podcast. If you're just joining us, we have been discussing raising emotionally intelligent children. We're now wrapping up the program. It is coming on down to the final moments, Garth.
That's right. We're happy that you decided to stay with us. We hope you found it useful, and we've got to say a big thank you to our production team led by Tashai Grant.
Big up.
Yep. As always, we want to hear from you. So send your suggestions and your questions to Jamaican Dadz podcast at gmail.com. That's Dadz with a Z. And as ever, find us on social media at Jamaican Dadz if you're Facebook and Instagram, and also on Twitter, the Jamaican Dadz. Or just use the hashtag Jamaican Dadz. We'll find your comments.
With a Z.
With a Z. We'll find you wherever. Until next time, take care.
Big up.